Hello again and welcome to the third mini Latin lesson. This lesson concludes what we started in lesson 2 and looks at a different aspect of verbs, conjugation and tenses. More specifically, we will look at the imperfect tense and at a particular irregular Latin verb, namely the verb esse, to be. I've already mentioned in our second lesson that there are different ways of talking about a particular time, and we've seen, for instance, that English has two different ways of talking about the present, a continuous and a simple version. Latin, on the other hand, only has one set of verbal forms for the present, and we've seen how we need to use the context in order to decide whether to translate a form like amo as I love or I'm loving. Similarly, there are different ways of talking about the past. In English, this can be seen in the difference between I ate, I have eaten, and I was eating. These are different past tenses, the simple past, the perfect, and the past continuous. All of these have slightly different nuances. They imply how far in the past an action happened, whether it was repeated or not, and whether or not it was ongoing in the past or still continues now. Latin too distinguishes between different ways of talking about the past, and one of the most common Latin ways of talking about the past is expressed in the imperfect tense. This tense is used to describe actions in the past that are unfinished or incomplete, and this is actually precisely what the word imperfect means. It comes from the Latin adjective imperfectus, which means precisely unfinished or incomplete. Now this means that the action in the past described by the imperfect has either not been finished, as in I was eating cake but then the table tipped over, or that it was and may still be going on, as in I was writing a book last year and I'm still doing so today, or that the action happened habitually, as in I used to love sandcastles as a child. In this, the Latin imperfect differs from the Latin perfect, which is used to express concluded actions in the past, and thus frequently takes the role not of the English perfect, but of the English simple past. Especially in narrative and descriptive contexts, the imperfect too can be used to express a simple past idea. So, in different contexts, the single imperfect form amabam can be appropriately translated as I was loving, I used to love, or simply I loved. You find the forms of the imperfect on page 1 of the Lesson 3 worksheet and here. Already, a very quick glance suggests that the distinguishing feature of the imperfect across all 4 conjugations is the latter combination ba, followed by endings that actually look very much like the ones we already know from the present, only that the first person now ends in m rather than o. For amo, I love, this gives us the imperfect amabam, amabas, amabat, amabamos, amabates, amabant. I used to love, you used to love, he, she, it used to love, we used to love, you used to love, they used to love, they were loving, they loved, and so on and so forth. And it is your first exercise on the worksheet to complete the table for the second, third and fourth conjugation, and this should hopefully be quite straightforward. As for lesson 2, to conclude this section of the third video lesson, we will do a brief sample exercise for exercise C on your worksheet. Exercise C on the worksheet 3 is very similar to exercise C on worksheet 2, so you already know the pattern, only that this time an imperfect verb form has to be completed. Let's look at the sentence poetae veni ad Romam. Our task is to complete the verbal form veni and to translate the sentence. Aside from veni, this sentence gives us one noun, poetae, and one so-called prepositional phrase consisting of the preposition ad and the noun Romam. We can easily guess that Romam has to do with the city of Rome. In fact, it is the accusative singular of the fast declension noun Roma, and ad Romam means to Rome. Veni comes from the verb venio, I come. So the idea of the sentence will definitely be something about coming to Rome. This leaves us with poetai, a word we have already briefly seen in our first lesson. Poeta means poet and is one of the few masculine verbs of the first declension, that is, it follows the declension pattern of puella, girl. And if you don't remember the first declension, now is definitely a good time to take out your worksheet 1. In the first declension, I is the ending of a number of forms. Potentially, poetai could thus be the genitive singular, the dative singular, or the nominative plural. And this is in fact a situation that we have quite frequently when we are translating Latin sentences. One form could be a variety of things, and we have to turn to the context to decide. Since our sentence is still missing a subject, it is a somewhat likely proposition that poetai will supply our subject and thus be in the nominative case. So let's go with that. This allows us to translate our sentence, even though the Latin verb is still incomplete, as poets or the poets used to come to Rome. Great. Now we only need to figure out the correct verbal ending that allows our Latin verb form of venio to mean they used to come. In other words, we need the third person plural in the imperfect. And if we look at our imperfect table, the form we need is veniebant. So our Latin sentence now reads, poetai veniebant ad Roma. With this in mind, you should now be able to tackle exercise C and of course also exercises A and B on worksheet 3. To conclude our third lesson, we will briefly look at one further topic, the Latin version of to be. Like the English verb to be, esse, its Latin equivalent, is irregular, and I've given you the present and the imperfect forms on page 2 of worksheet 3 as well as here. As you can see, for the present, the stem of esse shifts between two different versions, and we get sum es est, summus estis sunt. Luckily, despite being an irregular verb, esse still has very regular endings, and so the persons are easy to recognize. In the imperfect, we get the same stem throughout. But again, the stem is quite a bit different from the present. So we get eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratis, erant. I used to be, or I was, you used to be, he, she, it used to be, we used to be, you plural used to be, they used to be. As with all languages, irregular verbs in Latin are simply something to learn by heart. And to give you a fast opportunity to do so, I've included a few esse exercises on the worksheet as well. So now you should hopefully feel confident to approach these exercises and have a better grasp of verbal forms more generally.